And the court decided that those are your own words, and your disclaimer does not protect you from making slanderous or libelous statements. So you are on the hook for what AI overviews say. Temu's spend fell off a cliff already at the beginning of June. Temu was at or above 70% of advertisers facing competition, quite intense. And after July 1st, they were down at 23%. So that's a massive drop.
It's massive. The very, very big and dominant fashion retailer in Germany, they basically took the decision to overspend by 70%. So the market is just there.
And if you're in the UK right now, I'm sorry, but you can guess what happens next. Welcome to another episode of Growing E-commerce. I am one of your hosts, Mike Ryan, and with me as always is
Chris, enjoying a Red Bull. I went too far to back down now. I'm a Red Bull fanboy.
You're steadfast. You know that we're not getting any sponsorship money for this.
Reiterate on that because it's true, but you're enjoying one as well.
Yeah, because you bought it for me. Thank you, Chris. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about a precedent set in a German courtroom that could have impacts on merchant center feeds all over the world.
A big one, yes.
Absolutely. And then we'll move on to, actually taking a little bit of a victory lap, to be honest. We got it totally right with Temu and Shein and the impact of tariffs, and we're going to give you an update there. So let's get into it.
Two great topics. I'm always pumped when we talk about the Chinese shines. I don't know why. Because for me, you're still Mr. Temu. You don't
say that too. No, I told you, don't say it too loud. I love whenever I see them squirming, and they're squirming right now. Yeah,
and I think Temu and Shein, but probably we do it as the last point of today.
Yeah,
but that's certainly massive news there. Let's start with the ruling, which might be way bigger than a lot of people think.
Yes, absolutely.
You want to shed some light on it?
Sure, I'll kick it off. So, there was a suit brought against Google. I have to check. It was actually a little while back. You know, court cases take a while, but the ruling just landed, so it's fresh. This was brought to a rather small regional court in Germany. But as we know, things can spread fast in Europe. We're fast at regulating. We're fast at at court cases like this.
We're world champions at that.
Yeah, everyone's good at something, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that again with Temu later. Yeah. So, but this is quite interesting. Basically, two publishers. There was really more or less one publisher and a subsidiary. They filed more or less a libel suit against Google AI overviews. And libel is just slander in written form. Yes. So it's when you non-lawyer here, but if you make a disparaging claim or a claim that can inflict monetary harm against someone and it's false, you're not allowed to do that. And
And I think a very important side note here is the precondition for that is that you literally have to own the statement. So you're responsible for the statement. You're not citing something. Yeah. It's basically your own idea.
Yeah, you're not quoting someone or something like that. Yeah, that's right. So AI overviews stated that these publishers were doing shady business practices, scams, this kind of stuff. Details are not too important. But what happened was Google said, hey, this is just AI overviews. It's based on information synthesized from the web and stuff like that. And
AI can make mistakes.
Yeah, we say in every response, AI can make mistakes. You are using an AI feature, all this kind of stuff. And the court said, sorry.
Fuck you.
Yeah, basically.
Sorry to be politically incorrect.
The court said that disclaimer is insufficient. And because Google has been protected in the past on their general search engine result page for surfacing sometimes objectionable content or stuff like that, they can't really be held liable for that. But this is text that was generated by Gemini, by Google's AI models, and the court decided that those are your own words, and your disclaimer does not protect you from making slanderous or libelous statements. So you are on the hook for what AI overviews say.
Exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head here, because I think the reason why by the way, I mean, the fact that Google was in front of court again, that's not big news.
Yeah.
That they lost is somehow big news because they lose barely. And the reason, and I think this is so important to understand, the reason why they basically were protected for such a long time with regards to the results on the search result page was because everything was rooted in basically data they were getting from some structured source, data feed, the website itself. This time they say, hold on, guys, this was generated by a product you created, which is Gemini.
And by the way, to make matters worse, my understanding is that it was a hallucination. There wasn't even like...
So it was not, please, let's be frank here. You're right. It was not true.
Yeah.
Everything we read about it, it was not true. It was literally not true.
Yeah.
So hallucination. Yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, we've known from the early days of Bard and so on that these companies were moving fast with this technology and that there could be exposure. But where I think this gets interesting for e-commerce specifically, I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here. Based on what I've seen living in Europe the last several years, almost 10 years, I've noticed that jurisdictions are very collaborative and they will often cite each other's precedents or kind of
learn from each other.
They learn from each other, let's say like that. Court cases get replicated. If one has been successful in one market, it'll quickly get replicated. There might even be active cases in other markets right now. I'm not sure. And you know, there's a lot of shared common law in Europe, and these things can quickly escalate.
Yes.
Just spread like a wildfire.
Yes.
The other thing is that I believe that a precedent like this could quickly spread to consumer protection, shopping and stuff like that, because there are existing directives. There's just plenty of precedent here that you are not allowed to make misleading statements about product characteristics, price, availability. This is all very frowned upon as a retailer, as a marketplace, which Google is in this case, or as a content, you know, what do you want to call it? There's some kind of hybrid between a content outlet and a marketplace here. So I think you could sum it up as false advertising, basically. If someone buys a product and Google had made misleading statements about that or recommended it based on misleading premises, hallucinations, I'm pretty sure we're not too far away from a scenario where Google will be on the hook for this stuff.
I think you mentioned you're willing to go out on a limb here. By the way, you can't be more wrong than I was wrong about my prediction with regards to US Belgium, where I said my US boys will win. They didn't. What you said makes perfect sense, and I tell you why. And I think we have been talking about this a couple of times before off the record. Again, another reason why Google basically had no issues with inaccurate product data was because everything was rooted basically in the data feed, right? Almost every campaign is drawing information from the product feed, and here the liability was fully on the side of the online retailer.
Yeah, true.
And Google was quite heavy on them, right, to stick to these rules.
Yeah.
In this new AI agentic surfaces, what is happening here? The shopping assistance is working, and it's going deep. I mean, I'm using it almost every week, and you get real additional information. You get recommendations. So it's like talking to a person.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's way more room to make an error.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about literal recommendations.
Yeah.
And I could think about so many cases, man. I have some issues with my leg, and I want the best fitting running shoe. I get recommendation. Maybe it get worse. Worst case is I rupture something.
Yeah.
You don't think that there are a lot of lawyers out there? By the way, our lawyer of our company, I love him dearly, is sometimes watching this. Please don't be offended. But I assume there are many lawyers out there who look at this case and think about thousands of similar cases where they can learn from this. That's why this case might be so much bigger than a lot of people think.
Absolutely. E-commerce, by the way, has been a rich target. There are a whole, because, for example, there are accessibility laws in Europe, and there are, you know, I don't even like this practice. I'm very uncomfortable with. There are law firms that set up scripts that run on e-commerce websites and look for little violations and just file suit. And it's just a big bank machine for them. And it's like, come on.
Yes.
These are businesses. It's all in good faith.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway.
No doubt about that. But
that's another topic.
That's another topic. But the human nature, right? I mean, we know how it is. And just one thing, Mark, before I hand over to you. As a matter of fact, the big difference here is, as far as I see it, we're potentially not talking about inaccurate product data, right? So if I have inaccurate product data, let's say that the price is inaccurate, or we're not talking about real issues here. That the real issue will probably look like I get a true recommendation from Gemini, and the recommendation leads to something bad. Yeah. And this is a whole different story. And I don't know how much Google might be protected in the future looking at this very case.
Yeah, I think that we've mentioned in the past that Google could have liability, and I think that's moving from theory closer to practice. But to your point, the feed has been this deterministic anchor. That content is owned and provided by the merchant, and shopping ads just use it as Lego blocks. That's changing. They're going to be writing titles more and stuff like this. By the way, there are new terms of services as of July, which might have some cover your ass type language in there too, because a lot of it is about AI creatives. But and Google Shopping, if you look at the European Union, has a database of, they call it the Statements of Reasons database. It's a terrible name, but it looks at exactly at content moderation. We talked about it on this podcast once, a long time back with Mark Zuckerberg.
Yes.
But Google is the most heavily regulated platform in Europe by far.
By far, yes.
By far. And you can look at other e-commerce platforms like Amazon, and it's nothing in comparison.
It's a 10x, 20x, I can remember.
It's insane. Yeah. So Google has been very tough. Everyone's seen disapprovals and so on. But I think when we've talked in past episodes about conversational attributes and stuff like that, that's why there is this push,
of course,
to anchor to the feed, and because they could crawl your page or stuff like that. Yes. But I think
they don't want to.
No, I think the risk of hallucination is too high.
Of course.
It's not only just a bad experience from a consumer satisfaction standpoint. I had a bad experience shopping on Gemini. I don't want to do it again. Yeah. But it could be from a consumer protection standpoint, a liability.
Of course.
So this stuff is going to be critical for sure.
By the way, we have covered this topic a couple of episodes ago. To quote you, Google is applying a strategy which is based on the idea to have Gemini running on grounded data.
Yeah.
So you could say, hold on, they are basically outsourcing all this information architecture, which is required to have a good experience on these agentic surfaces, to the merchants. That's what they do. This will probably cost them some time to market, because Google could, like you said, they could probably do it as of today. Just crawl the data somewhere.
Yeah.
But they don't want to, because it's that the risk-reward ratio is probably not worth it. Yeah. It makes perfect sense now.
Yeah.
The case still doesn't help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's to lose that. I really, man. When you told me this, I was like, this might be big.
I think it's going to be a massive precedent for Google on the publisher side too. Of course. But for e-commerce as well. And I mean, we see OpenAI. Look what they were doing in the past. They had these same problems, so they were scraping Google Shopping because it's a well-structured deterministic system. And we'll see where this all heads.
One last statement. I just can't hold back. I bet my butt off that when you know where I'm going, right? When Google got the information that they got sued, the lawyers of Google were like, in which country? Germany. Oh shit.
God damn it.
Because let's face it, whoever took this decision, by the way, I'm neutral on this because I don't know the details, but most certainly the whole atmosphere with regards to Google is not good in Europe in general. You know, the big tech companies, this hurt them. And Germany was probably the worst case to get in front of a court.
For sure. I mean, and publishers, that a publisher brought the suit is not publishers are pissed about AI overviews
in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes.
The German actually, we'll be talking about this is a perfect segue to our next topic. Europe likes to use courts and regulation.
Yes. We're good at it
for market protection.
Yes.
And they've used that against Google and big tech. And also, perfect segue.
How to protect the market against Temu and Shein.
Yeah. And
may I start with something here, Mike?
Go for it.
Again, dear listeners, this very charming gentleman in front of me has a tendency to undersell himself. I think, by the way, this is something the company is doing in general. I think we are sometimes way bigger and smarter than we think we are. I want to make sure now that this is not undersold now.
You have the tendency to oversell me.
Yes,
so
of course. Because we had to. Yeah, exactly. We need to balance the shit out.
All right, fair enough.
I'm not even overselling it, but I want to say dearly, this is why I'm now 16 years with this firm, and I'm still to this day. I have these really days where you feel just to be proud being part of this company. And this was another moment to get quoted by Reuters in a big headlining article, mate, for a company based and located and founded in Austria.
Yeah.
Austria is known for a lot of shit, but certainly not being the center of the universe for e-commerce. Being quoted by Reuters made a testament to our hard work, a testament to your hard work. And I just want to say,
hey,
man, I'm proud of this shit. Really, I am.
Thanks, Chris. It means a lot. Austria, the country.
So the selling is done now. You can take over.
The country known for skiing, mixing beer and lemonade, schnitzel,
being laid back, and being cooler than a lot of other countries. But
well, thanks, Chris. So, I mean, you heard it first here on this podcast 5 weeks back. We were talking about how these new tariffs that will be landing in Europe July 1st are going to break the business models of companies like Temu and Shein, AliExpress. These are ones you hear of every day. But also,
so what happened here? That there were basically everything below 150 euros. I think basket value, right? Was basically there was no tariffs on them.
Correct.
And exactly, and this basically was ruled against, and we have this de minimis act now. So everything there is at minimum a 3 euro tax on it, right?
Yeah. So the way this works, this is actually a temporary measure because beginning sometime next year, if it stays on schedule, they're going to have a whole digital infrastructure that powers a true closure of de minimis exemption.
Yes.
In the meanwhile, because it takes time to build that infrastructure, they found this other very easy thing to do, and it's actually worse than just paying.
Way worse.
It's way worse because, I guess it varies. And again, I'm also not a customs expert, but you probably pay anywhere between 8 to 12%, let's just say 10% on imports. And what this does, they're instead applying for packages under 150, they're applying a 3 euro fee per declaration item. And so to spell that out, if you would order,
5 items.
Yeah. 5 items in 5 different categories. It doesn't matter. If you order multiples of one, you're only going to pay 3. But for each of those 5 items, you'll pay $3. So, and that can end up being way more than 10%.
Way more.
So it's absolutely crippling.
And let's face it. And I think this is now basically set up in a new way. You have to pay these 3 euros basically, which can be way more than 3 euros and way more than the 15%. And this impacts mostly, of course, this big hyperscalers where we know that the average basket value tends to be significantly lower than the 150, given their business model.
Sure. Yeah.
So we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. We saw the first impacts. Back then in the day, we were talking about lowering CPCs because it was an indication that the advertising pressure of Temu and Shein is maybe not as high anymore because the business model starts to crumble because of that. Yeah, and now we have new data.
Exactly.
And this data basically validates that.
Yeah, there were the first signs of softness back then. And, I worked hard on this data, and so rerunning it, I brought this down to like a daily granularity level and looked at basically how present are these. It's a proprietary metric I made. It shows what percentage of advertisers, like we have a sample of 500, are facing daily competition from Temu, Shein, AliExpress, and so on. And we've used this metric in the past. We broke the news on Amazon turning off ads last summer. We broke the news on Temu turning off ads in the US in response to tariffs in the past. So this is a robust tool that we've used. But again, here it shows that Temu's spend fell off a cliff already at the beginning of June. So they were much more conservative. And Temu, on the other hand, played it, they were winding it down a bit, but then they catastrophically fell off.
Can we show the chart?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm pulling up the data here, which was published by Reuters. So to just dig in the numbers for a second here, like Temu was at or above 70% of advertisers facing competition, quite intense. And after July 1st, they were down at 23%. So that's a massive drop.
It's massive.
Yeah,
massive.
And I'll observe how that develops over time, where the floor is. Do they start to come back a bit? And then Shein fell from about a third of advertisers. You have to bear in mind that they're not in as many categories as Temu. Yeah. So within fashion, for example, insanely dominant. And they fell down to just 5% of advertisers off a cliff, and they've been at that level.
May I ask an obvious question? And we certainly don't know it because we don't talk to top management there, but it has to be the answer to this de minimis act, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the exemption, it has to be.
Yeah, and some other fines.
There's no other reason.
There were some other fines that they faced. It could, I have to look at Shein's timing. They jumped off earlier, and maybe some of these regional fines were part of that, but it's about de minimis for sure.
May I tell you, we haven't talked about this. May I tell you just based on this data? Because the big question now, of course, is, what do I do with this information?
Yeah.
And I can tell you firsthand, last week I had a chat with I can't drop the name here, but a very, very big and dominant fashion retailer in Germany. They basically took the decision to overspend by 70%. So basically they are completely rebudgeting the whole year because they saw massive market chances. So the market is just there. They were directly impacted mainly by Shein.
Yes.
And I think this is the big chance now depending on how big this overlap was, but you probably have a market untapped now at way more profitable CPCs. And whenever you have the flexibility in budget, go for it because you don't know when they're coming back.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to have to see if and how they adapt to this.
They will probably, right?
Yeah. And I have a call. I can't say with who, but I have a call this afternoon with a very large German retailer about this topic as well. And I'm curious what we'll hear. But it varies by category. Like Temu dropping out, for example, that affects a lot of categories, but it's complicated because there's a huge amount of overlap with Amazon there. Amazon's going to soak up some of this. But for example, Shein dropping out, Amazon can't pick that up.
Exactly. So because it's a protected.
Yeah. So in those categories, it's even a larger opportunity. So it really varies case by case per advertiser.
So to the listeners, if you're interested in talking with us about, we are super open to that because there's a very, very high chance that this has already had impact on your account and maybe you didn't know it. You should look this up.
Yeah, definitely. And I have tips as well. I'm a reporting nerd, and I can help you figure out how to find that. But I just want to mention back to the Reuters article real quick, and we can wrap it up. Their ultimate interest in this, because what I love about this data is that it has information to different people or has value to different people for different reasons. For example, obviously, if you're in advertising, there's a clear reason why. You can be watching the stock market and you can wonder what happens to Alphabet's stock or things like that. And in this case, Reuters was really interested in Shein's IPO efforts. Yeah.
Yes.
Because
didn't it get delayed?
They've moved it. They've switched locations. Multiple. I don't know the whole history, but it's been a roller coaster. Yeah.
This hurts them badly.
Yeah, this is the next pit.
Because guess what? We talked about that as well. The domestic demand in China is I don't know, crumbling, maybe too strong of a word, but it's not there. That's why this international expansion is so important for the needed growth rates.
Yes.
And I don't think that they can compensate this massive drop in ads visibility with organic traffic. No way.
Definitely not. And by the way, if you are in the UK, or I have to fact check myself here, but I think Australia, Canada, I think certainly the UK, these are some of the last few sizable Western markets that are not protected from this kind of de minimis abuse.
So to our UK listeners, talk with our teams or talk to us, because you might see way more pressure coming from these guys.
Well, here, just before we let the topic go, because there was, for Reuters, I did pull one more insight, which they didn't print, but it's an interesting one.
Shame on them.
Wow. Yeah. So I looked at what happened to Shein's advertising spend in Europe last year when they got forced out of, it was a similar situation. They got forced out of the US due to tariffs on de minimis stuff and other sources. But, they were back then, before the tariffs, they were hitting about 1/4 of our, a quarter of our advertisers, 25%. Then beginning in May, that had immediately jumped up to a third. The change happened in April. And then beginning in June, it was at an all-time high of over half. So they
from 25, it's basically
it doubled. They massively shifted their investment.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
to Europe. Yeah, because the US market closed.
The money goes where profitability is.
Yeah, and if you're in the UK right now, I'm sorry, but you can guess what happens next, and you can thank Brexit for that, to be frank.
We will keep monitoring this data because this is globally impacting the e-commerce world. And I think there will certainly be another episode in the next couple of weeks to keep the world posted. What's going on here?
Definitely. But I think we've chatted long enough, and
maybe too long, but I enjoyed it. I always enjoy it. Mike, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, sir.
And listeners, if you enjoyed it too, then this was another episode of Growing E-commerce, brought to you as always by Smarter E-commerce. And please give us a shout out on LinkedIn or Twitter, X, wherever you are, Reddit, anywhere. And we also appreciate your comments in YouTube and elsewhere. I try to respond to them as timely as I can. Thanks.
I already responded too. I'm very proud of myself.
Thank you, Chris.
You always have to start with yourself.
Exactly. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.